Joanna Schrader. I'm here to testify on my own behalf. I just want to say that if Planned Parenthood is above board on everything that they're doing, they have nothing to fear. They should have no objection to the provisions in this bill. I also like to say that regulations regarding inspection were only policy in regards to Pennsylvania and the Gosnell situation. They were not mandated by law. And we see what happens when it's a matter of policy and not law. And there have been a number of clinic regulation bills that have swept the country in wake of that. And if they're, if these facilities are being run like legitimate medical healthcare providers, they would have nothing to which to object, and that's just the crux of my argument in addition to what everybody else has told you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? None. Thank you. Anyone for further testimony, either in favor or in opposition? Anyone for information purposes only? Representative Cox, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. That will conclude our hearing on House Bill 1846, and we will now move to hear House Bill 2074. Just for the committee's knowledge, we will convene an executive session immediately following this hearing. President White, thank you, and you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Representative White. I represent the 161st District. Bringing before you today a proposed bill to deal with a problem that I think every one of your offices has dealt with. If you checked with your legislative assistants, you may not have personally been aware of it, but we have an ongoing problem of it taking a tremendous amount of time for families to get death certificates. Now, that is not necessarily the norm, but when you have a case that happens that a family does not get to get a death certificate, it can create lots of different problems. For instance, you can't start probate. You can't, no transfer on death. Items in your checking account, things like that, can transpire. And we've had these in our office and several of the offices around us. This bill is, I will point out, I'll say it's the first time it's come up. It's a work in progress. We just got some information today that raised some concerns that we didn't think were concerns with people before. So we're going to be working on this through the rest of this year and probably in the next, obviously. What I'd like to do is quickly tell you what the bill does. We currently have an electronic death certificate registration program in the state. This bill in its current form would make that mandatory. Several other states have done this. There are a lot of advantages to it. There are, we'll have some witnesses and tell you some disadvantages. I'm willing to discuss that portion of it with people, and you see how we can work with that. What we have laid out is that funeral homes would have 1 day to enter the data, and they're the I've just been informed of a few other circumstances, but in the normal course of an event where someone dies, say in a nursing home or at the home, their body's taken to a funeral home, they actually start procuring the information. They do the initial entry into the electronic system we have in the state. I actually did the training on it. You can all go ahead and do that. It's 3 parts, 6.5 hours to learn to see what we do with this system. At 1 day, our bill recommends to do that. The physician or coroner then would have 3 business days to fill out their portion of it. We have an exception for that. I use the word exigent circumstances. Long-term absence, illnesses. Several of our physicians and medical professionals here tend to do things like you go to Africa for a month and do surgery. You go down to Haiti. We have several of my friends do that. And they're just not available to do that death certificate. So we have an exigent circumstance where that 3 days takes care of those scenarios where the physician is physically not able to do it. We also, and I believe this has already been in one of our other bills, we would require an online password reset of the system so that the physician or medical professional could actually reset their password if they don't do it very often without having to make phone calls. The key part of this legislation that we're really concerned about is that after 5 business days, if a death certificate is not complete, that the family would be able to request and receive, for my phrase, a provisional death certificate. Some states that do this call it a death certificate pending diagnosis of death. The bottom line is that the funeral home, the mortuary, somebody has a body, the person has died. And we know that. We're not, at this point, concerned about how. The ultimate permanent death certificate will have a cause of death on it. For a vast majority of things that you need a death certificate for, you do not need the cause of death. To initiate a transfer of death in your checking accounts, things like that, that's not necessary. To notify Social Security, other states do this. As you know, I like to steal things from other states instead of recreating the wheel. We use Virginia's, Tennessee's, Vermont's. We have several of the statutes we borrow from. You can initiate your Social Security to stop benefits. And one of the things we do not have in it, but has been proposed as a possible amendment, is to have a direct interface upon completion of a death certificate with our voter registration system. But the 5-day provisional is key, because that is what we run into. In our district, we have a scenario where it was, I believe the individual passed away on December the 13th, and it was in mid-February, and we hadn't had, they hadn't been able to get a death certificate. And this is not a scenario where the coroner's involved and they're worried about, some thing happening, or, we're having to run DNA analysis to see why the person died. It's just because if you're going the paperwork route, that it gets lost in the mail. It gets sent back without the box checked with the signature on it. Then it gets lost in the mail. Or if we're dealing with the electronic system and the person just never signs it. They just don't get around to it. One of the other things we do have with it, and we borrowed this from Virginia, is that the physician is allowed to delegate someone filling out the form. Your physician is still going to be determining a cause of death, but I would dare say in a lot of physicians' offices right now, the person actually punching that keyboard may well not be the physician themselves. The physician has documented the cause of death. We allow, in this bill, borrowing off Virginia statutes, physician's assistant, an associate physician, chief medical officer of the institution, individuals whom the physician can delegate the authority to complete the certificate, such as a personal assistant, things like that. Physician's assistant, sorry. That the physician can delegate that off to. They're not making the determination of the cause of death, but they're able to fill out the forms and execute it. We do have a good faith protection for the signatories involved with it. If there is a problem with the determination of death where you're having to go and do various testing, and those labs do have, if you get into sort of DNA type analysis, those can be time delayed. So we have a 6-month window. That should be plenty of time to require that testing be done, so that at the end of 6 months we can have an actual cause of death out there and have a permanent certificate. We have a 1-year window of implementation. I'll discuss the department. We talked with the department several times on this. I'm sure they'll be here to testify either against or for informational purposes. Again, that date is some of the things we ask. Oh, we do have, by the way, a notification system. Oklahoma texts their doctors when they have when there's a certificate that needs to be signed. Right now in Missouri, we have no way. We do not require any notification of the physician. I guess the physicians are just supposed to check out there periodically and see what they've got, or else if it's in the case of the mortuaries, funeral homes, they have to call them and say, hey, you've got something out there you haven't done on the system. So this would require an electronic notification, and if that takes longer, we'd be, again, willing to talk about it. I would be happy to talk about why I would make the electronic system mandatory. Questions of provisional certificates, I think we covered why they're important. I would like to talk, one of the things, if you'll note, the financial note's a little big. My thought would be you pay for your provisional death certificate, and then you get one when it becomes permanent, because you're going to want to keep it permanent, not a provisional. You would get it. Well, there was a concern that this would cause a tremendous amount of money loss. I didn't realize we made as much money on death certificates as local governments and whatnot do. So I have an amendment here that I'd be happy to incorporate at some point in time that just says you have to trade in your provisional for the permanent. You give the people back the copy, they give you mail it in, or whoever you have to deal with it. You give them back the provisional and you get your permanent, then you don't have to pay for the extra copy. and that would, I think, take care of almost all, except for the programming expense for the department of implementing the programming changes. That would take care of a lot of the local expenses, some of which I think was like up into the $2.2 million range of lost revenue. So that's a brief, and I don't believe we have any witnesses here. Some of our support today kind of went south on this, just because they got into what the bill does and they weren't quite aware of it. So I don't know that I have anybody here to testify for it.
All right, well, thank you for bringing the bill. Do the committee members have any questions? Representative Wood.
To inquire, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. On your provision for changing the passwords, since you can require or request a password and change your own online, why the necessity for making it a year before you would have to change it again?
I think I actually stole that from the chairman's bill initially. We kind of took that out. That would be very subject to negotiation. That was what we had on an earlier bill here, and in building this bill, we just took what we'd already heard once. So if we wanted to make it 4 months, or I realize that the OA has a certain thing they like to do, or we've talked about the different, I've never changed my bank account. They have a little picture I have to identify, and they also can look at what computer I'm from, and if that's not something they're familiar with, it comes back and asks me a question. My intent of that is to make it easy for the physician or the coroner or whoever is doing that electronic system to not have to make it as seamless as possible for them.
From the IT side of that though, and if someone would happen to hack into this, they're the ones that's going to be held responsible. So I'm all in favor of them determining when the password length or how much time that's going to be, because if we wait a year, your password gets leaked out, you're like most people, you put it on a sticky note on the bottom side of your keyboard because you don't remember it anyway. Someone comes along, they hack the information, produce a death certificate that shouldn't be.
Totally willing to modify that.
So if we just take the year out of that and just leave it to where they can change their own password at any given time,
I would be
I'm
good with that.
Who can issue a death certificate?
Well, my understanding is that you can actually go to the funeral home and request the death certificate. It is issued by I'd have to pull the statute, it's our registrar of the locality can issue it, or you can get one from the state. You can mail in, and the Vital Statistics Department can send you one.
Okay, because one of the issues that I've had as a constituent was having trouble getting a death certificate. There were some kind of extenuating circumstances. The county coroner was the one that actually issued the death certificate.
But now they would be the one to sign it. Actually, the printing out of the system, one of our witnesses might be better.
Well, in this case, he was actually the one that was going to go into the system, type in the information.
Them entering the information and signing off, a physician would do, but they wouldn't. Once the information is all complete out there, I am of the impression or the understanding that Vital Statistics actually, or the local registrar actually, is the one that actually prints out whatever the little form looks like.
Okay, because in this situation, and Doc may be able to help us on this, but it was a supposed suicide. The woman was long dead. The coroner pronounced, I'm sure a physician never had any connection to this, would be my guess. And so the coroner is the one that had to sign off on it. He wouldn't sign off until, or actually do the death certificate until the investigation was completed, but he could do a temporary death certificate, but then you'd have to reapply, change the things. And with the 6 months, my concern, I guess, is sometimes the investigation may take longer than that.
Well,
I would hope not, but in this case, there was some issues with the lab being backed up and testing some of the information, and it had happened in November, and we were still trying to get it in March.
Yeah.
So is the 6 months, is there an extenuating circumstances we can add to that?
Yeah, I believe, I'm trying to remember, I've read a lot of these statutes. If ours has a limit out there now, or we have limits out there for various people doing various things, and there's no enforcement ability there. We can say something has to be done. I think right now physicians are supposed to do it in 72 hours.
Okay.
But there's no enforcement. If they don't, there's no penalty. the concern on that was trying to force people to be diligent. And I realize if you send something off to DC, because they're the only lab that can do what they can do, and they don't do it for 7 months, you're out of luck. The coroner actually filling out the thing, the provisional would not be filling out new things. This is, again, this is a computerized piece of information, and if they do it by mail, it's going to have to be entered manually into that computer system, because we keep our death record, our death certificate things are computerized in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
So it's just, when there is no basic cause of death there, my intent would be that you would have this, I call it provisional, so they didn't like, if you don't like that word, death certificate pending final determination of whatever, comes out, because you've got all the information there already. What's there is there, and it's in the system. They're not going to have to re-enter. It's just, if it's not complete, you get a provisional.
Okay.
Or as I'm calling it, and the big thing, we run into the scenario where you have, especially in my neck of the woods, you have a very patriarchal system, and you may have a dad with a business, and the mom doesn't have her name even on the family checking account. Definitely not on maybe his construction business. All of a sudden, there's bills due. I mean, he dies quickly of a heart attack, and you don't get a death certificate for 2 months. You've got these bills you cannot access, the financing of the business. She can't even get access to the checkbook to write groceries, things that are in his name. So it becomes very critical, and those type of things, to get that transfer of death, to start a probate proceeding, to notify in the case of an elderly person, the Social Security Administration, those don't require a cause of death. And I appreciate the insurance company. There are a lot of things they're going to want to do that they're going to want to cause death on. You may have a policy that doubles if I don't know if they still do those with an accident or if it's natural causes, things like that. That is going to happen the way it happens now anyway. When you finally get that cause of death, we're trying to take care of probably, I'll say 95% of those problems where there's a delay to move it along.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are welcome. Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative White, you said that there are some, this electronic registration is in the state of Missouri in some instances at present, right?
Is what?
In some portions of the state, it's already practiced, correct?
My understanding is that 100% of the coroners use it. About 95% of the funeral homes use it. I think the vast majority of physicians would use it. I have been told we have one person in my county that is a physician who does not have a fax machine. I don't really know if you can practice that way if you deal with any of the federal programs now, but and it has been stressed to me that my bill does away with paperwork, and I would be more than happy to consider trying to keep that paperwork in there. I think it might cause more provisionals to occur. I think paperwork can cause a delay, but the vast majority of things we do now are just done on the computer.
So you're trying to get a uniform protocol going here,
well, right? I'm trying to get it done expeditiously for the family, and trying to do it with as little pain as possible for the department and for the physicians or coroners and the funeral home directors, the people that are using. I actually took the training on the electronic system, and it's one of the places in the training it warns you not to hit the enter key or you'll be kicked out of the system. That's actually in the tutorial. So I program for nuclear plants, so I have a little issue with that. So that software maybe, but it is in the Departments of Defense. I think this is used by, I think they said 20 states or something. It's a very widely used software package. It just is a little in need of tweaking maybe, but try to make it easy.
Yeah, and this information it goes through the county recorder too, right?
The local recorder can, in my understanding, issue, but there is one of the technicals I got on it is they have a limited access. I'm not quite sure what that is. That there's maybe some concern on what they can access and cannot access for the ability, what they'd have to do to get them to be able to print out the provisional.
Where I'm trying to get to is I had a conversation with our Mississippi County recorder several months ago, and I believe this was the issue that he was talking to me, and he talked about how much better it was, the efficiency, the expediting the process, the whole thing. And so anyway, I'm trying to support your bill.
Well, I appreciate it. To me, we are in a computer age. I realize that I have relatives that aren't in the computer age, and it's
you're living in one that's not.
But ultimately, I mean, we store data electronically. My concern is that we can get this to where a family doesn't, you got the loss of the person, and now you're giving them a financial burden because the person has been buried or cremated by now, and you can't access anything financially for them. You can't proceed in getting on with the probate, that sort of thing. So that my intent is from the survivors to move it, and I want to make it as easy for everybody along the process, from the funeral homes, physicians, coroners, the department, as possible. But that my end goal is if somebody has to do more work so that we can get a death certificate in 99% of the cases within 5 days, that's what I want.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions, Representative Kirkton?
Inquire, please.
You may.
Good afternoon, good evening. You mentioned, I think, that some of your supporters had some concerns with the bill.
This is the first time this bill's been put forth by me anyway, and I think it's the first time that to my knowledge, we've looked at a provisional scenario, and so this is the first hearing it got, and some of the support, I think when people read it, they had concerns, they talked to their people, and the paper going away, I think you'll hear is a problem.
Okay.
Again, I think some of the problem is where you have people that don't do computers. Oh, it got lost in the mail. Well, I've actually in the last month gotten 3 things in little plastic bags that are wet and shredded, and that so that it really did get lost or got ate in the mail.
Right.
And that if we get ultimately we need to get rid of that. But if we need to, I'm much more willing to progress this slowly over the year. So if they really want to keep paper in, I do think it will probably that will be where some of your delays are, and you'll see more of these provisionals or pending, whatever we want to call them, certificates, because it takes longer to mail to somebody, and then it sits and goes through the various inboxes, finally gets to the physician or the coroners. I've been told all the coroners do it electronically, but to get the physician, and then if he has gone on, I used to say, I have one doc I know, a friend who goes to Africa once a year and does surgery for a month.
Right.
And if he's gone for a month, then we don't have the ability for anybody else to fill in. A coroner will not step in in a normal death center. They just don't do it. I mean, they can, but they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's a solo, he doesn't have a partner. If we don't authorize like the PA, or we don't have some other way, you're not going to get a death certificate until that guy comes back from Africa and goes through all the paperwork.
Yeah.
And I believe there is a little bit of an issue with payment for. We have policies that funeral homes get paid. You have prepaid funeral stuff. My understanding is that a provisional saying yes, we have a dead person should be enough to kick that. It will not do for a lot of insurance policies. I'm not saying it's going to work for, okay, who's beneficiary, if you don't have cause of death and you have policies that accident or natural causes difference, those just have to wait. But the moving along is what we're trying to get, and I think that we've done some checking with the industry, and our initial results today was that they'll take a provisional would be fine.
Okay.
We'll have to verify that for sure.
Yeah. And if someone died under suspicious circumstances and that sort of thing, that would be.
Well, you could still do the provisional because they are dead. It would any sort of if you have an insurance policy that if it's an accident or natural causes, or if it's non-natural causes, I don't know if we write those policies that way anymore, but that you're just not going to know until all the tests are done, the coroner's done their thing. That we don't impact any of that except that we want to get it done within 6 months if at all possible.
Okay.
Ideally, we'd get it done a lot quicker, but the 6 month out there was just to kind of try to push the people to keep calling and say, hey, it's 5 months, you got it done yet? Hey, it's 5.5 months.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are welcome. Representative Pace.
Thank you. To inquire, please.
You may.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good.
Great. I just wanted to ask one thing. I was just wondering if the system itself, it's not going to be an integrated system or real time. Say, for instance, if you're, keying in that data and there's no programming or anything that would be written for that to integrate to the other systems and the other people that are involved with it.
Well, right now, it's the same system. If you take the tutorial, there's a part that is filled out by the funeral home, and then there's a place where either the coroner or the doctor fills out the cause of death information. There's some other information they get. And in scenarios where the body doesn't go to the funeral home, which I had just got approached me, we're going to have to figure out who enters that. But that the physician doesn't enter everything. They have their part, the funeral home, the person where the body goes, and I've got to see on the non-funeral home passage where that gets filled in, but it is they all log into it. That's part of the problem with the password